Good morning. This is Tracy Halesvass, right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM, Farmington, New Mexico. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Sherri Burr, the author of A Short and Happy Guide to Financial Well-Being. Good morning, Sherri.
Good morning, Tracy.
And so I very much enjoyed, but I learned so much from your book, A Short and Happy Guide to Financial Well-Being.
I like the word enjoyed and learned.
Okay.
Because enjoyed is great because a lot of financial books are so dry that people don't finish them. And
Right.
I deliberately set out to make this book enjoyable. Why there are so many examples that are funny and humorous and hopefully make people even laugh out loud.
Oh, it did. I love your the published poet and her problems, and the secretary. All the funny names for people. It's very good. Scattered secretary.
Yes, thank you, thank you. That was fun creating those euphemisms for a type of personality that can get themselves into financial trouble.
Oh yes, learned lawyer even doesn't do so well.
Yes, yes, and that's because so many lawyers, like other people who spend a lot of time at universities, end up with a great deal of debt. And then because they have so much debt, when they finally finish their studies, they feel like they owe themselves. So they have a tendency to spend rather than to focus on getting rid of the debt that they've accumulated, and that gets them into deeper trouble.
It's really true. Yeah, they've earned it now. They can just spend everything they have.
Exactly. That's why doctors actually have some of the deepest financial issues because they come out of medical school with extreme debt, and then they feel like because they sacrificed for so many years, they have to have a Mercedes G-Wagon and a beautiful home, and so they just accumulate even more debt, and that can add to their stress levels.
And then credit cards are ready to give credit.
Absolutely. And that was partly why I have a chapter on bankruptcy and illustrate what happens to people like Published Poet. Mm-hmm. You would think that after she went bankrupt twice, that no credit card company would ever offer her another credit card. But that was not the case. In fact, almost within a month of her receiving the final discharge of her bankruptcy, she started receiving more credit card offers.
Right.
Some of which were from the same companies from which she had just discharged her prior debt.
Right.
She's learned her lesson.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's
and then
good.
2 bankruptcies pretty much did it for her. She stopped doing it.
That's good. But you go into so many issues like that for the real person, and you have so many really practical guides and charts.
Yeah, that was the goal. I mean, the book, A Short and Happy Guide to Financial Well-Being, is aimed at the real person, the regular person who's out there trying to manage their money. And it's deliberately set up because there are healthy times and weak economic times that everyone experiences during their lifetimes. There are constant economic cycles, and we've been through several just within the last 10 years.
Yes.
From the financial crash in 2007 and 2008 to an uptick where things were going really well to now there's some indication of a slowing down of the economy.
That's right.
So how do you manage through all those cycles? That's important for people to think about.
And this book isn't just for people who invest big and play the stocks. This is for just someone how to manage and make a budget with their everyday income and debts.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking when I wrote this book that it would work for someone who makes $1,000 a month on Social Security, like Published Poet, or who makes $3,000 a month as a secretary, or who makes $30,000 a month as a doctor.
Right.
In all situations, if you don't plan, you can end up in trouble.
Right. Yeah, you made that clear. I really enjoyed the charts that you have here. They're very clear.
Thank you.
And then you go even just into little things about thinking about paying $3.50 a day for coffee and how that adds up. Things we try not to think about, but really should.
Exactly. You know, $3.50 for coffee adds up. And if you do it every single day in a 30-day period, that's $105.
That's right.
And people say, I don't have money to get out of debt. Well, you could take 5 of that $105, buy your own coffee, and put the other 100 into decreasing your debt.
Exactly. And you even go into shopping and how the best thing to do with shopping is to buy quality, but don't overbuy.
Exactly. Quality clothing, quality items that are sold inexpensively, either because of the time of the year or because of sales.
Right.
I loved Gilda Radner, who was one of the feature players on Saturday Night Live.
Yes.
When she said, it's against my religion to pay full price for anything. Right. I think that statement should apply to every religion.
Absolutely. You even go into getting rid of something when you buy something new and things like that.
Yes, to keep the flow going in your closet.
Right.
One of the things that happens is that people tend to accumulate, and then they feel weighed down by all the things that they've acquired. But if they have a constant flow, anytime they buy something new, they've got to get rid of something that's already there. Then it keeps their wardrobe refreshed, and it keeps them from accumulating things that they never wear. Because most people wear 20% of their wardrobe 80% of the time. So that means that there's 80% of the wardrobe that's rarely being worn, and there are a lot of things in most people's wardrobe that are never worn. And if you've gone through a year or two without wearing something, it's time to pass it on, like to Goodwill or to Savers, so someone else can enjoy that item.
Right. Yeah, that was very revealing to me, that if you go through your closet, make sure you need what you buy, and then get rid of something else. It keeps it fresh, and you do wear those things you have that you've forgotten about.
And not only need, but also love.
Right.
You know, there are things that in your closet that you tend to love and you want to wear over and over again. And that's why it's easier to have fewer things that you really love and you want to put on, as opposed to having a whole closet of things that you wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole.
That's true.
If you won't touch it and you won't wear it, why is it there?
Somebody else can enjoy it.
Exactly.
Right. Take this minute and read a little bit from this book for us.
Okay. So one of my favorite chapters is Chapter 2, and it's called Nor a Lender Be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from the Shakespeare's Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 3, where a character says, neither a borrower nor a lender be. And most people are borrowers, and that's why I spend Chapter 1 explaining how to get out of debt.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that most financial books never touch on is how often people lend money. In fact, I can't even think of another financial book that has this chapter, because most people, and I've spoken to groups all over the country about this, from students to senior citizens, and people get hit up to loan people money, and they never think about the consequences for their own lives when they loan people money. And one of my favorite stories was a Seattle businessman who I met at a conference in Phoenix in 2008,
yes.
And I sat down for breakfast at his table, and you know how conferences are. You
yes.
see people, and you see people at breakfast, and you just join them, right?
Right.
And so I sat down, and this guy started talking to me, and he said, the mob is after me. I gambled and lost $4,000. He said a friend had called him and said this to him. The mob is after me. I've gambled and lost $4,000. If I don't pay by tomorrow evening, they're going to kill me. Can you loan me the cash? And the Seattle businessman said to me that when he received the call, he had just caught his wife cheating on him, and it occurred to him that he decided to loan the money because if the guy being chased by the mob paid him back, it would restore his faith in humanity.
Right.
And I know you're laughing,
yes.
And I responded incredulously, you were counting on a compulsive gambler being chased by the mob to restore your faith in humanity? Yes, the Seattle businessman said. If I saved his life and he paid me back, there would be proof that there is a God. So what did you do? I asked. I went to my freezer and I took out $4,000 and deposited in his bank account the next day, the Seattle businessman reported with a slight stutter. You keep money in the freezer, I asked. Did you have to thaw it overnight? No, he said. Money doesn't freeze. Why keep it in the freezer? Because it's the last place a burglar would look, he said, and I need an emergency stash in case something happens and I have to leave quickly. What kind of emergency, I asked. Like an earthquake, he said. A lot of people don't know that Seattle sits on an earthquake fault line. Okay, so what happened? Did he pay you back? He called a couple of weeks later and asked if he could borrow $3,000 more. He said his wife left him and he had an urgent need to hire a private investigator. Did you loan him the money, I asked? Yes, I took another $3,000 from the freezer and deposited it in his bank account. He said he'd pay me back in 3 weeks. Did he? I got back $700. Okay, so that's an example that's an extreme example of someone asking for some money and a person being willing to loan it. And in this case, the guy ended up loaning out $7,000. And when I asked him how much money was left in his freezer, he said only $4,000. So he had started out with $7,000 was loaned to the guy being chased by the mob, and he had $4,000 left. So he started out with $11,000, and he gave $7,000 of his savings to someone being chased by the mob. That's ridiculous.
That's crazy.
Why do people do stuff like that, right? That's crazy.
But you do say how some people don't want to hurt other people's feelings, so they don't, want to lend it. And
exactly.
That was really interesting.
And this is where I challenge people to start thinking about their feelings, about how they are going to feel when this person doesn't pay it back. The reality is, in 99% of the cases, people never pay back the money.
Right.
So I make the argument that you should just give the person the money if you want to and have it, but don't loan it because it's not coming back and it's just going to destroy your relationship with that person.
Exactly. That was a great chapter. And like you said, I haven't read anything like that, but it's so true.
I employed a lot of techniques that I came upon.
Mm-hmm.
One example was learned lawyer who had an aunt who went through a gambling phase,
mm-hmm.
and the aunt would frequently call family members seeking money to pay utility bills. One day, the aunt called learned lawyer and asked for $103 to pay her electric bill. Learned lawyer responded, "I was just about to call you. My mother needs to borrow $140. Can you loan it to her?" Silence greeted learned lawyer's appeal. Her aunt never again called requesting a loan. She eventually stopped gambling and then had the resources to pay her bills. And my advice is try this the next time someone asks for a loan. Ignore their request and immediately turn the tables. You'll be surprised at how quickly this ends their calls. People who borrow do not want to loan money. And in fact, I think of all the tips, that's the easiest tip to employ whenever someone asks you for money. Just quickly ask them for money and ask them for more than they're asking for, and that ends it.
I love that. Yes, that's very clever. I'm going to try that next time the kids ask for money. So, Sherri, this isn't the only book that you have. In fact, you have quite a repertoire, and you're a professor emerita from UNM, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I started teaching at UNM in 1988, and I like to say they hired me when I was 10 or 12. I do have a body of work. I've actually written 26 books, and I'm working on 3 more right now, most of them in the law field. And it's one of my deepest pleasures in life is writing to help people understand either legal issues or business issues. And right now, 2 of the books that I'm working on are historic issues.
Oh.
Yeah, so I like just delving into complex situations and thinking of ways to explore them and teach about them in fashions that are accessible, which is why I like humor.
Yes, and I noticed on the titles from your website that many of your books are like law for the layperson.
Yes, in fact, I've written several books in the entertainment industry, and the New Mexico Film Office just asked me to give a lecture on film rights for film people in New Mexico. And they said that one of the requests they most get is wanting more explanation of contractual rights in the film industry. And I like doing those kinds of lectures because it helps people understand what they're up against. One of the strangeness in film contracts is when people are offered a percent of net profits. And they could be offered 5%, 10%, 20% of net profits. But the film industry does the accounting in such a way that net profits always equals 0. So you're better off getting a contract that offers you 0.1% of gross than you are 10% of net. But a lot of people see 10% and think that's way more than 0.1%, but it's not when you look at the intricacies of how the accounting is done.
Well, someone like you is such a benefit to the art world. I know that as a writer, that artists and writers are very, very creative, but when it comes to the legalities and the economics and everything, sometimes we just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And like you said, 10% sounds so much better than 0.1%, but not really.
Yes, exactly. That has been one of my pleasures of living in New Mexico, is that we do have the highest per capita rate of artists of any state in the country. We do have a sizable population of writers. We do have a sizable population of film artists. So it's a very creative state, and it's why people like Georgia O'Keeffe were attracted to come here.
Yes.
There's something special about the light. There's something special about the topography. I mean, it's just a beautiful state.
It is. It is. And you've worked with artists on a television show, Arts Talk?
Yes. For 19 years, I had a television show. I produced and hosted a television show called Arts Talk, and episodes are available on YouTube.com. You just type in Sherri Burr or Sherri Burr, Sherri and Burr, and Arts Talk, and you'll get a series of episodes that I filmed with various individuals. And the whole concept of that was to get artists talking about the social significance of their work, why they produce certain types of art, how they're inspired, who inspires them, as a way of fostering community engagement.
That's exciting that you understand artists and also understand legalities. I think that's great. And your book, this book that we've started off talking about, A Short and Happy Guide to Financial Well-Being, won some prizes?
Yes, it did. It won the New Mexico, it was a finalist, and then it won the New Mexico Book Awards for Best Business Book. It also won national awards, and it placed in various categories around the country. So it was well received, not only as by people who have read the book, but also it did well in competitions.
I could imagine why. Because, like I said, it's written for just the regular person. Sometimes I go at financial books with, a little bit of hesitation. But this is just real.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And that was my goal, because exactly of what you're saying, that a lot of people hesitate when thinking about financial issues, even though it's such an important part of our life.
Right.
It determines who we are, to the extent that the more resources that we have, the more things that we can do with our life, the more we can travel, the more we can have certain types of experiences. And so finances are an important part of our life. And that's why I love the title, A Short and Happy Guide to Financial Well-Being.
Yes.
To get people thinking about how doing well with your finances is going to contribute to your overall well-being and is going to make you happier in the long term and the short run.
It's like make money work for you rather than always work for the money.
Right. And to lessen your stresses, because the more in debt you are, the more stressed you're going to be.
Isn't it true? Yes. You were talking about how the audience can find your YouTube interviews with artists, but they can also find another web presence at sherryburr.com.
I send people to Amazon.com.
Okay.
Or westacademic.com, which is the publisher of this book.
Great.
At a conference where people are hearing me speak, and then I will have the book with me available for sale and signing.
And you still are a speaker.
Oh, yes. I speak all over the world to various audiences, and I have several set up to go already, and it's one of my pleasures in life is speaking to people who come out because they're interested in particular subjects.
And you speak on finances and what else?
Yeah, so I speak on finances. I speak on legal issues related to art. So I give lectures on art law, film law. I speak on behalf of the New Mexico Endowment for the Humanities, where I give 2 lectures that are available for community groups to book. One is called Race and Racism in the New Millennium, where I talk about the various challenges that people of color face and economically, and how to overcome those, so that all of us can be on a lookout, either if we're either interacting with people of color or we're in a situation where implicit bias can come up. Because one of the things that's happened over time is that you can, and the country has, eliminated a lot of the legal restrictions that govern racial interactions, but there's still things that are deep in our psyche, and that can lead to biases that make a difference on people's financial well-being.
Right.
And not only for people of color, but also for women.
Right.
And so that's a lecture that I give, and that a lot of people have felt very helpful to their understanding of things that take place in the workplace. And it's led to some surprising results. When I speak about certain types of implicit bias, I've had Hispanic women come up to me and say that they have felt most discriminated against by Hispanic men. And that I've heard many, many times. And so there's even within cultures, there can be implicit bias related to genders and how you perceive people of a certain gender.
That's fascinating. And something that people should be made aware of.
Yes, there's a test that one can take through Harvard University.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the implicit bias test. And what you can do is just Google Harvard implicit bias test, and it should come up Race IAT. And what it does is it allows you to take a test that measures whether you are slightly pro or seriously pro or neutral people based on their race or their gender.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, it's a great test. I mean, it's really interesting how people's perceptions of groups can depend on what's going on in their life and what's going on in the world and how they might interact with particular people.
And this could reveal things that people didn't even know about themselves, sounds like.
Exactly. That's why it's called implicit bias. We are not even thinking of how we feel about particular groups. You know, we may think of ourselves as someone who always treats everybody the same, no matter what their race or their ethnicity or their gender. But when you take the test, you realize that there can be biases that are hidden within your psyche.
Right.
And how that relates to financial well-being, for example, is that tests have shown, for example, that African Americans entering into car purchases tend to get worse deals than Anglo-Americans, and white women get worse deals than white men. So one of the things I talk about, how do you eliminate that? And one of the ways to help avoid that is to try to get as much detail as possible on the type of car that you're purchasing. Because it's available, the cost of the car, you can get it from Edmunds.com or Kelley Blue Book, KBB.com, so you know what the dealer paid for it, and then you bid for the price of the car based on what the dealer paid for it rather than what they're put on as a sticker price.
Oh, that's very informative. So go armed with information.
Right.
That's great.
And one advantage that white males have is that usually this kind of information has been passed down from father to son to generation to generation to generation.
Right.
And so one of the things that I try to do is to tell other people that this information is available to them too. And you don't want to overpay for a car because that's going to affect your overall financial well-being. You know, you'll be spending more money taking care of a car than you might if you got a lower price. And, you know, if you bought the car using monthly payments, you want the lowest monthly payment as possible to pay off the car in a shorter period of time. So you have a period of time where you have no payments.
Wow, that's great information. Well, that's terrific, and I wish we could talk longer because you have so much good information to share.
Well, Tracy, thank you for inviting me to be on your show, and I appreciate that your listeners were willing to tune in to a talk about a short and happy guide to financial well-being.
Yes.
And the book is available through Amazon, and locally it's at bookstores such as Bookworks has a local author section. Also, the new bookstore, Organic Books in Albuquerque, has a local author section. So it can be ordered online or through certain bookstores that have local authors.
That was Sherri Burr talking about her book, A Short and Happy Guide to Financial Well-Being, and her other writings and speaking. This is Tracy Hales Vass, right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM